I'm Mike, owner of the In-Groove in Phoenix, Arizona. Today I wanted to do a sonic review of the 6 albums inside of the new Beatles 1964 Capitol Mono box set. It's kind of a hard sonic review to do, and I'll kind of walk you through how I kind of approached it. A lot of people are like, how do they sound? And my initial thought was, well, they sound good, but what do you compare that to? These essentially are the American versions of British releases, but the track listing is not the same. The cover is not the same. Songs are missing, songs are added. So there's really only one thing you can actually compare it to, and that's the original albums, the US Capitol Mono albums. I think these were in print originally up till around 1968. The Capitol's Beatle stereo title stayed in a print late 80s or late 70s, early 80s. But, really the only thing you can compare it to are those 60s Capitol Beatles titles, which I have a few. I'm not a huge fan of them because these are actually pretty terrible. So, I did that. I compared. I've got Meet the Beatles, the first Capitol release, technically their second U.S. album after introducing the Beatles. I have Something New and the Beatles' second album, which is technically their third. But, comparing those back to back with these, the new Capitol Mono box set, or individual titles, just absolutely wreck the originals. They don't even come close. But there's a lot of characteristics of the original that's kept intact. The originals, one thing that was always cool about these is they were cut really hot and gritty and very mid-range, punchy, and that kind of appealed to rock and roll buyers in the mid-60s, 1964 in this case, of the American audience. This was made, as they, in their own words, say, for AM radio back in the day. But translated on vinyl, it kind of has a very visceral, rocky sound, really mid-range guitar rock sound. So in that essence, the new versions carried that over, which was kind of cool. You still have that visceral, cut hot, American-ish sound of the 70s, but they're so much better defined. You've got significantly higher quality vinyl. The bass isn't all mushy and muddy, and it hasn't been cut, and the top end hasn't been lopped off, and you're not left with just the middle that's been turned up, the goosed up center. You kind of have probably what was on those original American tapes back in the day, which was kind of a more full range frequency, had the middle, but it also had the bass and the treble. Kind of a decision they probably made back in the day to lop those off to kind of appeal more to the average record buyer stereo equipment. They were making these were targeted at kids. They're serious adults in 1964 weren't buying Beatles records. This was kid stuff. So the records were made kind of for that market. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was have something decent to compare these to. It was such a it took, you put this on, and then you put this on, and it's like 6 seconds later, you're like, okay, we're done with this. Nothing to see here, because this just, the new versions of this just wallop it. Not even close. But now, let me compare it against something good. So, you kind of have to do it on a track-by-track basis, because although this is technically the second album in the US, this is the first album in the UK, there are some carryover tracks. Well, track, for instance, I Saw Her Standing There. Really, most of this album, Please Please Me in the United States, came out as introducing the Beatles on VJ, which Capitol wasn't in the picture yet at that point. But I was able to compare an individual track. I Saw Her Standing There. When it came to, other albums, I was able to compare with the Beatles certain tracks. I compared Roll Over Beethoven. It was spotty. I kind of had to do it on a track by track basis, and then some of the covers. It's running into a blur. Maybe Roll Over Beethoven and Please Mr. Postman. But one of the easiest titles to actually compare was the UK Beatles for Sale and Beatles 65, because side A is mostly a like-for-like affair. I think it's all but the last track of side A is different. I think they cut one track on side A off of course, I've got them both turned around. I think they cut one track off of side A, and that's the only difference. But yeah, so this was a little bit easier because I was able to go from No Reply all the way down to Mr. Moonlight on the UK. This is from the 2014 mono box set, which I've talked about on the channel quite a bit. I'm a big fan of it. And I was able to pretty easily just compare this across the board. Yeah, No Reply to Mr. Moonlight. Man, wait a minute, what's missing? Yeah, Mr. Moonlight in Kansas City. The 7th track is cut off. And I think that came out like mid-65 on... It's kind of interesting, they used half of the record and on side one, and then typical Capitol fashion. They were bastardized. But I will say, as a whole, they're very enjoyable. Because one of the things that we got as Americans, and keep in mind I wasn't even alive yet, is we got all the hits. So I kind of... and always have, because I kind of got started on these myself, because when I was young and I was buying records, I wasn't buying British originals like in the 90s. Those were collector's items. I was finding garage sale, Capitol, beat up Capitol records. So that's kind of what I was used to. So I will say, when I'm comparing individual tracks, I prefer the British, the 2014 mono box set. Not cut as hot, which I like the idea of it being cut hot. But when I kind of volume match the titles, there's just a little bit more clarity. There's just a little bit more balance to it. I feel like the soundstage is just a little bit more even keel. Where with the box set, you're getting kind of a hodgepodge of stuff. But that's because there's a lot of hodgepodge sourcing going on. Some of the tracks are in true mono. Some of the albums, the whole album is in true mono. But some of them, it's like fold down mono from a stereo, and we got to assume, obviously, right, these are maybe third generation, if you want to consider the UK Parlophone first generation. What do? Do they make a copy and then cut it up and then make those masters, or do they just cut up the second generation tape? Needless to say, we're 2 or 3 generations away from the master tape, so there's not the clarity and the definition that you're getting with the 2014 monos. But it's not really fair to kind of compare the two because they're not the same albums. They're not even close. It's similar. There's some of the tracks are the same. Right now, the 2014 mono box is maybe $1,300 to $1,600, $1,700, depending on the condition and that you find it in. The individual titles from this box set are $30. Now, and they're all analog. They're cut from the Capitol Master tapes. My box set, although it was dirty, I was able to clean it, and they actually play really good. They're really noise-free, and they're done at MPO, which has not been fantastic for me personally. I've had a lot of issues with pressings out of MPO in France. But these are actually really clean and quiet once I literally just clean the hell out of them because there was so much dirt and dust on them. But once I gave them a good, nice, long ultrasonic bath, if you don't have that, I apologize, but that helped me. But these are going to need wet cleaning, I feel. Just the way they came out of the packaging, these are a prime candidate for a wet cleaning. But they're really clean and they're quiet, and they're $30. Now, if this 6 discs box set, it's half of what's in the mono box, but let's assume this was $700 for the 6 discs, about $100 an album like the 2014 mono Parlophone. Would I say this is a good choice? Would I recommend this? No. But at $30, they're in print, they're easy to get, and they actually sound really good, and they're a fun listen. And I think in a lot of cases, for me, I kind of prefer a lot of these track orders compared to the British counterparts, because I kind of like having the hits interwoven into the albums. And I think that would be significantly more sacrilegious when you got into the later Beatles catalog, where those albums, like, you can't cut up Abbey Road, you can't cut up Sgt. Pepper. I mean, those albums you can't futz with. But maybe because I'm a different generation, I'm not as nostalgic for the UK presentation of With the Beatles. I mean, these aren't the albums, the quality albums that those later albums are. There's covers, and they were a young, early rock and roll band, and obviously they're still good albums, but they're not those great albums. So them being a little more chopped up and diced up isn't a problem for me per se. It might be for some of the folks who were there back in the day. I don't know. You can maybe tell me. I'm not really sure. But for me, it's not really a problem. And I kind of like the way these lay out. I kind of would see myself, and this is material I don't listen to too much anymore. I listened to it for so long, so many times over the years, from 12 years old, kind of when I got into the Beatles to this point. These earlier albums have never been my go-tos. But I kind of feel like with these, I listened to them all, and I enjoyed them. And I kind of feel like I would probably go and listen to these over the 2014 monos, or the original British counterparts, because I like the balance a little bit better. I like having the hits. How do you quantify a review like this? In American Beatles capital land, these just are the best that I've ever heard. There's nothing that even comes close to these monos. All the stuff from the 60s fails in comparison. So if I was doing a normal straight-up review, I would tell you these are the go-to sonic marvels. There's nothing better. And there's not. It's not even close. These are fantastic. But I wanted to kind of do a little bit more comparison. And most of us, we're not listening to albums on a track-by-track basis like I was doing when I was comparing, I Saw Her Standing Here, the Capitol versus the 2014. Who's listening to records like that? But I wanted to kind of get a little bit more outside perspective and see how they sounded. But in a box, they're fantastic. And for me, and again, this is a personal choice, these are probably like what I'm going to pull. But even saying that, probably not going to do it too much, because for me, and I think this is going with a lot of the younger generation, the back half of the Beatles catalog is where it's at, as opposed to the front of the catalog. And I could tell you that hands down from just my own sales as a record store. I probably sell 100 copies of Abbey Road for every one copy of, With the Beatles. It's like that significant. The disparity is humongous. So I could see myself pulling these Capitals off. They're really good. I don't really have much of a complaint. Like I say, you really got to get real tight and deep to kind of dissect the slight differences, but even those are minor. I didn't expect any of this. I expected this box set, which I have over my shoulder here, to be just an absolute turd. I had no hope that these were going to be good. I knew they would be popular. I knew people would want to recreate their youth in the 60s of having these records. But did I have any inclination that they would be to this caliber? No, I really didn't. So I'm shocked. And I think these are titles that'll pick up more and more steam as months go on. There wasn't a huge FOMO effect with this like there would have been, for instance, with almost any other Beatles box set. I sold less of these than I sold when the box set was before Capitol or Universal or whoever was in charge decided to just reroute all the crap to Amazon and leave all the record store owners high and dry and boned. But even before that decision, I sold more of the greatest hits box set from last year than I did these. So there wasn't, I think, a lot of hope coming into this box set it was going to be as good as it actually turned out to be. So I think these titles are going to fare really well in the coming months to come, over the holidays. I think word will get out that, hey man, these aren't the crap that you might have thought they were. And I think they'll do pretty good. They really are quite impressive. And at $30 a piece, you're $180 for the 6 albums. Some people might still want the box set. It's 100, what is it, 170? 36? Yeah, it's about $130 more for the box set. And that nets you literally a box and the Beatles story, which I didn't even include in this because I didn't listen to it. I have no intention to listen to it. It's just like a 1964 audio documentary. You know, it's like a Beatles sales pitch on vinyl. So not really something that I'm going to dedicate time to. And I have all these wonderful other records I could be listening to. But yeah, the reaction's been good. I've played this box set 3 or 4 times in the store. People are like, wow, this is good. This is that box? Yeah, wow. You know, and we're getting a nice high quality version of, where did I put it? We're getting a nice high quality version of Hard Day's Night, which, you know, it has some of the movie tunes in it, which, again, finding a high quality mono version of that has not been terribly easy. So, yeah, I think this is a buy. At $30, this is a buy. Now, if these things go out of print, which I don't think it'll be anytime soon, but if anything happens similar to the 2014 mono box, would these things be a buy at $100 a pop? Probably not, but we'll address that in 4 or 5 years if it happens. But at $30, pretty good. I like it. I like having the hits. A couple less songs, but I like having the hits. I like having it kind of in this original Capitol presentation that I'm used to from when I was young. You can get them online at our website at themegroove.com. Until next time.